Dexter Morgan's love life is weird, complicated, and to be honest, sometimes pretty cringe. And yet, those of us who've binge-watched every single episode can't deny we're fascinated by his romantic entanglements. Yes, our favorite vigilante serial killer, who hunts down murderers according to Harry's code, somehow managed to attract a small crowd of admirers, girlfriends, flings, and in one extremely awkward instance, a sister who thought she might have deeper feelings for him. Like I said, cringe, but also oddly compelling. Brace yourselves, folks, because we're diving into 9 love interests. Let's begin, shall we? Number 9. Debra Morgan. Yes, it's shocking. We're starting with the adoptive sister as the absolute rock-bottom love interest. Cue the confused eyebrows, because I'm pretty sure most Dexter fans would agree that this storyline should never have happened. Debra Morgan, played by Jennifer Carpenter, is Dexter's rough around the edges but ultimately badass sister. She's a dedicated police detective with a filthy mouth and an even filthier sense of humor. Over the show's run, we watch Deb devote herself to her family, her job, and especially to Dexter, whom she adores as her big brother. Then season 6 hits, and the writers pull a twist. Deb starts going to therapy, only to realize she might be in love with Dexter. But they're siblings in every meaningful sense, raised in the same house, share the same father figure, and so on. So to many viewers, the Debra-loves-Dexter arc felt profoundly uncomfortable. Sorry, Deb, but when it comes to romantic potential with Dexter, you're last on the list. Number 8. Lacy. Now let's talk about someone you might hardly remember. Lacy. She appears in the single-episode fiasco known as Season 6, Episode 7, Nebraska. Dexter goes on a little road trip with the ghost of his dead brother, Brian. I know, it's complicated. And stops by this small gas station store where Lacy works. She's totally unassuming, polite, and probably not used to dealing with weirdos out in the middle of nowhere. Along comes Dexter, who is not only on the verge of a mental crisis, but also half entertaining his brother's suggestion that he murder her. Weirdly, or predictably if you know Dexter, he doesn't kill Lacy. Instead, they get intimate in the back room of the store. Then, to top off this brief fling, Dexter essentially robs her of the store's money like some anti-hero cameo and rolls back onto the open road. The entire situation is so bizarre, you barely remember it. Next up is Trisha Billings, who gets the honor of starring in the Season 6 premiere episode, Those Kinds of Things. She's another super brief fling, but a tad more memorable than Lacy. Why? Because this hookup happens at Dexter's high school reunion. Picture it. The popular former prom queen runs into the awkward weirdo from biology class, Dexter, who is now well-adjusted enough to mingle among the in crowd. Suddenly, Trisha's flirting with him in front of the trophy case. They sneak off into an empty classroom and do the deed on the teacher's desk. It's a funny moment that really shows how well Dexter has mastered his normal mask. Post-romp, both of them basically vanish from each other's worlds. If you were watching closely, you'd see it as an opportunity for the writers to show how Dexter's facade has evolved. But was it a relationship? Hardly. It's kind of like a funny little detail, you know? Dexter getting together with a former prom queen just to show he's fitting in perfectly. Next, before we dive deeper into Dexter's pattern, can I just throw in a quick request? If you're enjoying this deep dive into Dexter Morgan's twisted romances, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel. We're a growing community of Dexter fans, always ready to dissect the next moral quandary or ill-fated love affair. Your support keeps me motivated and it costs you nothing but a click. Done? Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, back to the mayhem. Number 6. Cassie Johnston. Moving on to Cassie Johnston, Dexter's amiable neighbor. Cassie shows up in the final season, Season 8, and is introduced through Jamie Batista, who's encouraging Cassie to give Dexter a shot. Cassie's sweet, laid back, and normal. Maybe that's why Dexter is so underwhelmed. He's never been big on normal, especially not in the later seasons when the body count is ever on his mind. Cassie tries to forge a connection. She's nice to Dexter, welcomes him into her apartment, but he's just not into it. Rather than continuing to date her, Dexter fails to return her calls. Burned and disappointed, Cassie rebounds with the next guy who shows an interest, Oliver Saxon, aka the brain surgeon. We all know how that ended for her. A grisly death that leaves Dexter riddled with guilt. Cassie's death really shows that anyone who's close to Dexter is in some serious danger. Unfortunately, Cassie was a sweet person who got the short end of the stick. Among Dexter's love interests, hers is one of the saddest stories. Number 5. Angela Bishop. Now meet Angela Bishop, introduced in Dexter New Blood, or call it Season 9. She's the chief of police in Iron Lake. Naturally, Dexter's living under an assumed name and trying to stay off the grid. Somehow, Angela stumbles into a relationship with him. Once more, we see Dexter attempting normalcy, working at a hunting store, flirting with the local law enforcement. You'd think Dex might have learned to never date a cop, but here we are. Angela is tough, committed to justice, and a single mother just trying to keep her town safe. On the surface, she's the perfect foil for Dexter's dark secrets. Their romance is more stable than, say, his fling with Lacy, but it all goes up in flames once Angela unearths the truth. In true Dexter style, it ends with bloodshed. She ultimately outlives him and manipulates the crime scene so it looks like she, not Dexter's son, delivered the final blow. Most fans either love Angela for her unwavering moral code or see her as a discount Deb. Regardless, from Dexter's perspective, any love interest who's also chief of police was never going to work out. He just can't hide who or what he is forever. Number 4. Lla West. Here's where things take a turn for the truly dark and twisted. Lla West storms into Dexter's life in Season 2, the year that many fans still consider one of the show's best. Lla meets Dexter when he pretends to be a drug addict and attends Narcotics Anonymous. She volunteers to be his sponsor, but before you know it, they're hooking up behind Rita's back. Lla is manipulative, cunning, and unbelievably attracted to Dexter's darkness. At first, Dexter is lured in by the fact that Lla wants to see who he really is. She senses the predator in him, and instead of running away, she draws closer like a moth to a flame. Problem is, Lla has a few screws loose. She commits arson multiple times, and let's not forget that she's responsible for the tragic death of Sergeant Dokes, the ultimate victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She nearly kills Dexter's would-be family too. In the end, Dexter hunts her down in Paris and stabs her in the heart. Lla definitely brings a lot of chaos into Dexter's life, making us think, if she had stayed around a bit longer, could she have completely unraveled him? Probably. She was powerful in her own manipulative way, and that puts her firmly at this spot on our countdown. Number 3. Hannah McCay. Hannah McCay. Is she the most controversial love interest? Possibly. Introduced in Season 7, Hannah is a plant whisperer who always has a habit of poisoning people who cross her. Dexter initially gets suspicious of Hannah's involvement in multiple murders, so he straps her to his kill table. But then, they share a moment of passion, and instead of slicing her into neat little baggies, he lets her go. How romantic, right? Hannah's nature fascinated Dexter. She wasn't just damaged, she was an actual killer, though more selective than your average slasher. Deb, for obvious reasons, insisted Hannah needed to go. Dexter refused, and eventually the two began a toxic, on-again, off-again relationship. They tried to create a future together, but the final season saw Dexter faking his own death and leaving Harrison in Hannah's care. Fans were split. Some believed Hannah was the perfect match. Finally, a woman who truly understood Dexter's monster and didn't flinch. Others found her storyline to be a sign the show was losing its cohesion. Then, in Dexter New Blood, we learn Hannah died off-screen, leaving Harrison orphaned in Argentina. So, was Hannah the true love interest Dexter always needed? Or was she just a convenient partner in murder? That's a debate that will rage on in fandom corners for years. Number 2. Rita Morgan, nee Bennett. And now we come to Rita, introduced right from the very start of Season 1. Rita is the single mother with a dark past of abuse who becomes Dexter's girlfriend. She's fragile, doesn't like sex, and is clearly dealing with trauma from her ex-husband. That works out great for Dexter at first, because he's not too keen on intimacy. They form a sweet, if initially superficial bond. Over time, though, Dexter starts to care for her sincerely. They get married, and Dexter embraces fatherhood to her kids, Asta and Cody, and to their shared child, Harrison. Rita might be the only beacon of genuine warmth in Dexter's life. She's the symbol of everything normal that Dexter thinks he wants to be. So, of course, it ends in tragedy. The Trinity Killer murders Rita in arguably one of the most shocking moments in TV history, leaving Dexter to discover her lifeless body in a bathtub full of blood. If you've watched the episode, you know the heavy feeling that scene leaves. Dexter genuinely grieves. He howls like an animal in emotional pain. It's not a fake reaction. He loved her. Many fans agree the show never fully recovered after losing Rita. Number 1. Lumen Pierce. Finally, we arrive at the top spot. Lumen Pierce, introduced in Season 5, right after Rita's horrific demise. Fans were still reeling from that heartbreak, so the arrival of a new love interest felt premature at first. But Lumen's story is compelling. She was kidnapped and brutalized by the Barrel Girl Gang, a group of predators who tortured multiple women. Dexter stumbles upon her while tracking one of these predators and finds her caged like an animal. Unlike his usual victims, Lumen is a survivor who's seen unspeakable horrors. She and Dexter form a cautious bond. She learns of his secret, that he hunts bad people, and helps him bring down the men who nearly killed her. It's the first time Dexter fully shares his vigilante side with a partner who's not disgusted or terrified. On the contrary, Lumen is grateful. She needs Dexter's brand of justice to find closure. Their relationship is built on trust, mutual respect, and yes, a lethal synergy that sends them after the scumbags responsible for Lumen's trauma. The heartbreak is that once Lumen has killed her tormentors, her dark passenger is gone. She no longer shares Dexter's compulsion, and she decides to leave him to start a new life free of violence. Her exit is quiet but painful for Dexter, who for the first time saw a kindred spirit, someone who needed his darkness to find redemption. Many fans, myself included, see Lumen as Dexter's true soulmate. They fit together in a way that felt raw, honest, and heartbreakingly temporary. Now that we've ranked them all, you might be wondering, does Dexter have a type? Absolutely. If we observe all 9, yes, even including Deb's weird crush moment, they almost always fall into one of 2 categories. Either they've got serious trauma of their own, or they're somehow drawn to Dexter's hidden darkness, or both. So that's the common link between Rita, Lla, Lumen, Hannah, and even Angela to some extent. Deb's an anomaly, but we can chalk that up to questionable writing. You might ask, what about Cassie, Trisha, and Lacy? They were either just too ordinary or too brief to really make a difference. Even their cameos show what Dexter really prefers. He's not into healthy, average romance. The only person he truly invested in was Rita, but even she had a traumatic past. Lla was an unhinged firestarter. Lumen was a survivor thirsting for justice. Hannah was a poisoner, and Angela was a battle-hardened chief of police. All of them either carried baggage or had the capacity for violence, which intrigued Dexter's damaged psyche. In the end, does Dexter truly find love? That's the million-dollar question. The show does a great job of depicting him as an anti-hero struggling with a morally bankrupt lifestyle, governed by a father's code. Yet we see glimpses of real emotion. With Rita, we saw heartbreak. With Lumen, we saw care. With Hannah, we saw a man trying to carve out a future. So, yes, I'd argue that the capacity for love is there. It's just overshadowed by a compulsion to kill. And that compulsion inevitably dooms every relationship Dexter touches. Now's the time to pick your corner. Which ship are you on? Team Rita? Team Lumen, Team Hannah, or Team Angela? Or are you the chaos gremlin rooting for Team Lla because you love a disastrous romance? We can't forget those rare souls who might still defend the weird Deb storyline. If so, I have many questions. Regardless of where your allegiance lies, Dexter's love life is an essential puzzle piece in understanding him. It shows us that even a killer can yearn for connection, fatherhood, and acceptance.